Embroidery is an art which is assumed to be indigenous to India. And indeed, the country has spun a rich tradition. The art has, however, left little evidence even for admirers who have to depend on literary sources to provide grounds for its existence in the ancient times. Like folklores and songs, it has also lived and been handed down from generation to generation. It has been practiced in several regions, including the modern-day Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bengal, and the states of southern India for years. Chamba, a northwestern district of Himachal Pradesh, is one of the oldest princely states in India and has a rich history of art and craft. The word Chamba Rumal implies a peculiar visual art that represents unique and charming embroidery done on a hand-spun cloth with untwisted silken thread, which is greatly inspired from Pahari paintings. The tradition of this kind of pictorial embroidery was known and practiced in some areas of Himachal Pradesh and Jammu, which remained once important centres of Pahari painting. The earliest specimens of art embroidery on cloth in the style of miniature painting was found at Basholi, belonging to mid-18th century. During the reign of King Amritpal, it came to be known as Dogra embroidery, and Basholi emerged as an important centre of the art and commerce that attracted the embroidery of Kashmir Valley. But, under his successor Vijaypal, the political insecurity drove the artists and the artisans to safer place in the neighbouring kingdoms. Consequently, the art of embroidery spread more vigorously in Chamba under Raja Raj Singh and in Kangra under Maharaja Sansar Chand. Thus, the period from 1764 to about 1823 CE was the time when the art of painting was at its zenith. The image of miniature paintings were translated into Kashidakari or embroidery, which took the pride of becoming the celebrated feminine craft tradition of Chamba. Women of the royal household or the wives of nobles used to embroider the well-composed rumal in leisure hours as a pastime activity. Technique of make of Chamba Rumal. The fabric used in Chamba Rumal was silk, hand-spun and hand-woven cotton or fine muslin of off-white colour. Silk was used generally by the royal clan of Chamba for the Chamba Rumal, for presenting it during the festival times or during the marriage ceremonies. Silk, being an expensive fabric, was not used by common people and was considered a symbol of status. The most popular fabric used for rumals was khadar or hand-woven cotton because of its availability, low cost, durability and manufacturing in Chamba. Muslin, being light and easy to handle, was preferred by the women. The use of mill-made cloth is noticed in Chamba rumals in the late 19th century. This fabric was brought to Chamba from Punjab by the itinerant traders of Sukhochak town, Tehsil Shakargarh, district Gurdaspur, now in Pakistan. The figures as well as the floral patterns drawn on the Chamba Rumal are filled in with the untwisted silk floss, also known as pat. Sometimes the women used to get silk threads dyed selecting the tones and hues according to their fancy. The colours noticed in Chamba embroidery are purple, pink, orange, carmine, deep red-brown, lemon and deep yellow, dark green, ultramarine, Persian blue, black and white. Silver wire or tilla, known as badla, is also noticed on old Chamba rumals, which with the course of time tends to tarnish by the oxidization. Craft production process. The method of embroidering the rumals was simple. The cloth employed for the embroidery was generally unbleached muslin or khadar, varying in size from 1.5 to 4 feet. The drawing was drawn in outlines with a fine brush by accomplished Pahari painters. Sometimes the female embroiderers would prefer to draw the patterns and figures themselves. This resulted in two different styles, one elegant and fine in draftsmanship, and the other somewhat coarse and bold in treatment. Sharp pointed needles were used for embroidery. The medium length needles with large eyes were used. There was minimum pull or tension on the yarns as they were too delicate and would break if handled with force. It was very important to execute embroidery at right tension so that the finished result would be neat and even on both sides of the fabric. The embroidery was done with silk in double satin stitch, which is believed to be of Chinese origin. It was known as Do Rukha stitch, as the name implies. It could be viewed from both the sides or aspects. The stitch was carried both backwards and forward and covered both sides of the cloth, effecting a smooth finish that was flat and looked like colours filled into a miniature painting. No knots were visible, and the embroidered rumal could be viewed from both sides, making it reversible. The outlines were worked in stem stitch, and there was generally a border about 2 to 3 inches wide along the edge. Other stitches like the cross stitch, the buttonhole stitch, the long and short stitch, and the herringbone stitch, as well as pattern darning, were used occasionally. Embroidery, like any other art, has been a part of culture of a country. To understand Indian culture, Indian embroidery must also be studied. It was customary to gift embroidered rumals in the girl's marriage in Chamba. Hence, subjects like wedding scenes were popular and were repeatedly embroidered. The bride herself learnt this craft at a very young age, and the handicraft, being an important item of the dowry, was dependent for its existence almost on the social custom. Keeping aside the social side of the art, the skill had meant more to the women of certain classes, who led a more sheltered life. The rumals, even today, affect their lives in a more personal way. Excluded from the major social scene, these women turned to this art, which offered them a welcome feeling of self-expression and meant more to them than just a leisure activity. Thus, without any doubt, embroidery holds an important place in the history and civilization of the country and its people. Within the boundaries of the fundamentals of the art being feminine, there was and is a significant scope of creation. Like paintings and sculptures, it also depicts the lives and beliefs of the people and the changes that took place over time. But what makes the art distinct is the small set of patrons whose lives circled around it. For these women, in their circumscribed existence, it shed in their twilight corridors and dim chambers the lustre of their burning and melting inside. The art that was once distinguished by grace and naive charm of its patrons has now been reduced to minimal. The Himachal Pradesh government has set up a centre for promoting and training in the local crafts of the region, and with the added support from some NGOs is trying to preserve the dying art of Chamba.